A very good evening and welcome to this edition of the Fourth Estate. Charles Mongu Shampagi. And tonight, murder most foul. Another young Ugandan is kidnapped and found murdered. Actually, two young Ugandans. The social worker, Maria Nagirinya, working with the Center for Integrated Community Development, CDID, was murdered just this last week after being kidnapped, I think on Wednesday, and then her body discovered on Friday. She wasn't alone. She was with the driver, Ronald Chitayimbwa. Many Ugandans are not discussing the fate of Ronald Chitayimbwa, and I have seen some social media discussion on these other forgotten people who die. If people remember well, when Andrew Felix Kawesi was murdered, he was murdered with two other people, Erao and Mambewa, his driver and bodyguard. Then when Muhammad Chirumira was murdered, he was murdered with another person, a lady. That one never got talked, has never been talked about. Then there was another person, even Abiriga. Two people were killed in that murder. Even this Muhammad, Haji Muhammad, the husband to Mama Fina, the late husband. Also, two people were murdered. But of course, the question maybe is, who is the target, and what does it mean to focus on the target of these murders? But for Maria Nagirinya, this is a strange murder because kidnap, and then there was no demand for a ransom or any communication to the family. And from what we know now is that she was killed within hours of being kidnapped. They just picked her from her gate, went and murdered her, dumped her car the same night, dumped her car, and then moved on. To discuss those and other issues with me tonight, I have a team of journalists, starting with Jeff Mbanga. Jeff works with the Observer newspaper as business editor. Very nice to have you, Jeff.
Thank you so much, Charles. Good to be back.
We have Kenneth Anderson Lukwago, works with Radio 1. Kenneth, very nice to have you.
Thank you for having me, Charles.
And we have Agatha Atweide. Agatha Atweide is a lawyer and a journalist. She is an independent journalist at the moment. Very nice to have you.
Good to be here. Thanks, Charles.
Thank you. Of course, the other stories, Uganda Airlines returned to the skies of the region. We are running a story in the East African of the troubles of careers within the region. One is Air Tanzania flew, they also just returned to the skies, only earlier than Uganda Airlines. They flew one of their airplanes to Johannesburg, South Africa, and the farmer there, whom the Tanzanian government owes money, impounded the plane. Number two, pilots of Kenya Airways went on strike just this last week as Uganda Airlines was returning into the skies. But Uganda Airlines has had successful trips to at least 3 different destinations. I think now we're counting 7. By the end of the week, we are closing in on the 7 destinations. We're counting the 7 destinations. And from what we know, or what we are reporting in the East African, is that the airline has been able to move close to 300 passengers to the different destinations. The emerging, I'm excited about the emerging new destinations, particularly Somalia, because Somalia was one of the most booked, especially on the return flight. And then Juba, South Sudan, particularly because of the involvement of the Uganda People's Defense Forces and the sacrifices that Ugandans have made to bring normalcy to those two capitals, Mogadishu and Juba. That's a bit exciting. The Nairobi route, which everybody was focusing on, had a shaky start with only 8 passengers going into Nairobi. And then I think on Friday, they accomplished this Dar es Salaam route. And what is missing, of course, is the route to Kigali. They have indicated that the next schedules will have Kigali coming on, but that's a curious absence. So Uganda Airlines is flying into Nairobi, flying into Mombasa, flying into Arusha, flying into Bujumbura, flying into Dar es Salaam, Juba, and Mogadishu. We'll be discussing a bit of that. And is it the oil costs, the back and forth over Uganda's petroleum find? The tallow farm down collapses. We'll discuss a bit of that. And if time allows, we'll discuss the rules around elections as announced by the Electoral Commission midweek. So let me start with you, Agatha. On these murders, the murder of Maria, not many murders, not many people have come to life, literally, in their death after they have died. But a lot of focus on Miss Nagirinyas, the late now, her social media, Facebook and photos there, a happy go life, a happy person, recently married, and she's kidnapped. One of the members of her family who had come to open the gate for her sees the scuffle and is able to report, and the father and other family members run to the police. Now the question is, how does police respond after receiving this information? You take?
It's unfortunate that we are coming to the same thing that we have discussed here before about the role or the effectiveness of the police in protecting, in doing what is essentially their job of protecting lives and property. Because I would think that something that happened and was seen happening, police would, you know, act very quickly and maybe save a life, but unfortunately it was not able to happen. And that brings Nagirinya to the list, the long list that we talked about here as we discussed the threats or the alleged threats around the life of Minister Anite. Because we listed here many women that have been killed, that were killed in Entebbe and Nansana. The recent one whose murder is almost the same as Nagirinya, Susan Magara. But no one, there's no, at least we should know the motive so that people who are still here know how to tread carefully and know this is the cause of what is happening. But they seem to be random, and we have failed up to now to get at least a clue of what is going on. And to me, that still brings us back to the question of, is the police doing its constitutionally given mandate or duty to protect the citizens of this country, and what is going wrong, how can we correct it?
Yes. Kenneth, the police finds itself caught between a rock and a hard place. Just hours before the news of Nagirinyas kidnapping, and as they started looking for her, and then the finding of her car dumped somewhere in Atete, in Kitoro zone, the police had just issued a statement over something that's political that everybody was jumping onto, involving the young man Beka Kasumba, an alleged NRM supporter, and his cape. Can police navigate, especially public perception, when it's faced with these contradictions, that it's quicker to react to political cases than it is to real threats to life and property of Ugandans?
Well, the way the police has been set up, you can clearly see there is a problem. And I think this feeds into all these unresolved matters that my sister here was talking about. When certain things are complicated, that require maybe expertise from the police, maybe at a forensic level, you find that they have complications. So they are very quick to jump onto what one would call maybe the simple cases. Because, for instance, that young man who was nailed, let me from the start say that it was such an ugly incident. The only justification maybe that was there, something that could probably link him to the NRM, was the beret, which I also don't think that has been officially accepted by the NRM as one of their attires or so, because I see a few handful people were actually using it.
It came up because of the red face that the people power people had started using around 2017. So the thing is like a counter message.
The thing is, if you look at the statement which was issued by Onyango,
the police spokesperson,
the deputy police spokesperson, the headline was that police is investigating an incident where somebody was nailed, and then towards the conclusion, that's where he gets it wrong when he says we will not allow these kinds of political crimes and things like this. For me, I got defeated because I thought there would be an investigation first before we could conclude that actually this was a political problem. Because afterwards we have heard about different stories where people are saying that This young man has been a member of a gang that snatches bags around the northern bypass and so forth. So the entire thing is mixed up. In other words, the way the police does the investigations becomes a problem. And the only thing I would say about the complication maybe the police had with the investigation of the death of Nagirinya and Ronald Chitaimbwa is this seemed to be a kidnapping of some strange sort of, because there was no demand for ransom. And like you rightly said, the killing occurred almost a few hours after the kidnap had happened. There was no communication, maybe to tap the phones to find out exactly what could have happened.
Even where there was a communication, the person was never.
But I've seen, at least with other jurisdictions where the police is effective, people who are expertise in murder cases will tell you actually the body speaks for itself. The body of the deceased should be able to give you some pieces of evidence about what could have happened. So I think
the debate, Jeff, here is on the response time, because unlike other kidnappings that have ended in murder, people wake up the next day, a day after, where there's been no communication or demand for ransom, like happened with the Entebbe women and the Nansana women, is that someone is walking about in the backyard, they find a body. You don't know where the body is. You're beginning from zero to find out who is this, how did they end up here, where were they killed from, were they killed here, or was the body just dumped here? But in this case, there is an eyewitness who sees a scuffle and this woman being taken away. There is immediate response from the family that goes to the police. That's where the criticism is coming from. Are you able to train that center in Natete, which actually happens to be the police, the police jurisdiction within which this incident happened?
And we have CCTV
yes,
cameras.
where you have the headquarters of CCTV, and you put up these CCTVs, justifying their deployment to exactly deal with this kind of crime. But there's no response because there is a wailing father worried about their daughter who tells you, my daughter has just been taken. That's where the police is getting a lot of flack. Can they defend themselves in the circumstances? Would you understand why the police in action?
In a way, you have to feel for the police. I mean, the response time, let's be honest, was a little bit short. I think Maria was kidnapped at around 11 p.m. The father runs to the stations probably right after, so this may be around midnight. And he's crisscrossing between Natete and there's another small police station there. And in terms of whether the police responded effectively, I mean, we live in a country where almost nothing is effective. I mean, no institution is effective, but at least you want to see that at least the basics are being done. And in so many ways, I think the police failed on the basics. I think there's a story that says that at one station, one of the police officers was steaming alcohol at that hour of the day. It's probably of the night. Probably understandable for some police officers to drink a little bit more than they should. On the job. But on the job. So but in terms of the, I mean, most of the police officers who are poorly trained, who are poorly paid, I mean, we all know this. We've seen them, steaming alcohol at odd hours of the day. But in terms of the response, the CCTV cameras actually captured the car somewhere around the Mukono area.
And where it was, the direction it was taking. And
probably where it was taken. And then the CCTV cameras sort of lose track because they do not cover a wide area of the country. So they cannot trace the car beyond the point that the cameras capture it.
And probably the kidnappers also knew about the presence of cameras, because it's something that has been widely spoken about as far as police is concerned.
I think for me, my issue is whether this death would have been preventable.
Avoided, yes.
I think this was a targeted murder. Like Kenneth said, there was no ransom. It was fast and brutal. What I think I would really want to see going forward from now on is what clues can the police come up with? Can they capture the killers? Are they trained enough to investigate these stories?
Let me just come in a little on that, because I've, from what I've been able to pick, one, the check on the CCTV cameras came from other members, other security agencies, once they came onto the case. And they came onto the case late. They're the ones who said, police, get into the whatever do they call it? The control room.
The command center.
The command center. Pick out that footage, bring it, and we begin following this case. And then they started moving on. What I see is a fairly casual killer who was not sensitive to your cameras. The number plates, they drove Nagirinya in her own car. They did not bother to cover or remove the number plates. They are picked up heading towards the Mukono direction. The CCTV cameras are able to pick them up on the Mukono direction. Someone was saying if someone had responded immediately and they checked, then they would have been able to make a call.
You alert.
You alert
next
stations.
police station.
You put a general message on the police radio system.
That is a car.
And say, there has been a kidnap. They're using this type of car. It's this color. It is this number, registration number. Then someone in the control room would be able to pick up and say, we have just spotted this car heading in this direction. So the units on that direction, the patrol police and other security agencies, associated agencies, would jump in there. I think that's where the police is being faulted extremely.
And
Number two, because when
I think it's a little bit unfair. I think it's a little bit unfair.
Jeff, let me make this. You kidnap people, two, drive them to Mukono, murder them, dump their bodies. Actually, whoever the kidnappers were had enough time, because they moved back into the boot of the car, from what I've been able to pick, got a jack of Nagirinya's own car and used it to hammer her and kill her. Then they dumped the bodies, and they have the audacity to drive the same car with its number plate back to almost where they picked it from, from where they picked her from. And that car is discovered the next morning at about 9 a.m. or later, and 9:11 or whatever time. Then the next day, because everybody's on the case, every person is talking about it. Then and even by the way, the discovery of the car, it was, I think, Monitor which found. People called the Monitor and told them, we have found we have seen a car, and then they had the description and said, but we have seen that car in our neighborhood, and then the police went there. Then after that, you find the bodies dumped in the other day, and the killers have disappeared. From what I'm hearing, the joint coordination of the different security agencies, they really believe they'll be able to track these people and find them because of that wealth of evidence that's available so far.
Charles, I'd like to hear why Jeff thinks we are being hard on the police, or it's unfair.
One, it's because, first of all, we have to understand that we live in a country where, systems don't work that effectively. We live in a country where it's poorly funded. No, it's an abnormal thing. For me, where I'll put the blame on the government. I would put the blame on the government in how they've structured the police, in how you have very unskillful police officers manning those stations. We have very uncoordinated agencies, police security agencies in the country. So the things, the narrative you're giving needs a high level of coordination. It needs a high level of skill from both the police, to track all these guys down. Isn't there a risk with the argument of generalizing otherwise good work done by some police officers and women and men, by some units, and the laxity of particular units in this case? Because they're very good policemen and women who spend sleepless nights trying to keep all of us safe and our property. And they do a good job. Now, if you say, but you which
see
is why I
systems,
think you're being, which is why I think you're being too harsh on the police, because at some point you can see they are trying to, at least at some point you can see.
At what point?
Where I disagree with
after
Jeff,
someone is already killed.
Where I disagree with Jeff, and I think maybe the police could have done much better, is the fact that the information about the incident was received in a very short time. Timely provision of information to the police to prevent or investigate is very critical. And if I also feed it into the narration you've just given, how the number plate was detected and how they could have probably coordinated better to be able to pursue the kidnappers. I don't want to sound like in movies, but we also have police choppers here that can actually do that kind of pursuing. For instance, when you have detected that there is a car that is moving on a selected road, the police choppers should be on standby. If you're really in place to save a life, I've seen it, like in developed countries, these things happen. The chopper goes in the sky. There's a light that really follows, and we have the choppers.
To be fair, murders do happen on a very high rate, even in the developed West.
Thank you so much.
That's my point. And all those systems fail to save
thank you so much. And that's exactly my point.
Jeff,
that even in developed countries, murders happen
Jeff,
where almost all this
what we are saying is what you started with, that could this murder have been prevented? Yeah, because you have a kidnap that is reported immediately.
Without prior notice that maybe there was a threat.
And we have cameras in this city that taxpayers spent billions procuring because of the murders that had been happening. And it was ostensibly for that. And those cameras, we thought, were to aid the police in resolving these kinds of crimes. And this is a country where many people have been killed in the recent past. So if you are a kidnap is reported to you as a police, you have to expect that the worst and act first. That's what we are saying. We are not saying we should live in an utopian world where there's no crime at all, but we are saying that a crime that could have been
prevented,
forestalled. And I have told a story before of how I was attacked in 2016 at my gate and hit on the head. I lost consciousness. They drove away with my car. I went to the police and I didn't want to go. I was with Dictor and Hagai Masuko, and Dictor was on my side. Because at police you go, register a case, and they close it and put it there. It's just a formal thing to do. They don't do anything. And I reached there. And they said, oh, what happened? I was heavily pregnant, so everyone pitied me and came around me. What happened? So I told these police women that we found at Chira Road police station. And they said, what? That place again? They started counting for us people that have been attacked there. It has become a dark spot. This one was kidnapped there. And you ask yourself, they know it as a dark spot. What have they done as police about it? You see what we are saying?
Yes.
That you even know a problem is happening, but there's not even police patrol. There's nothing. And when people come, you say that, file their case and keep it. I can assure you with some degree of certainty that that's what happened in Nigeria's case. That it became just put on file and keep. Because
no, the movements of the father between the police unit nearest to her house and the Beja police station at Natete was simply because you reach this point and you see there is no response. So you try to run to the bigger one and think maybe these ones will be more responsive. And some people have been saying maybe simply because he didn't know somebody big in government to pick a phone call and say this has happened and then all systems go. The argument, Jeff, is, and to be fair to the police, that we are coming as a country from a very dark past. Part of the reason possibly Kale Kaihura was retired early was because he had failed to rein in all these murders. So you have 27 women murdered between Nansana and Entebbe. And there is no trace, there is no justification, there is no explanation to an ordinary member, the public, of what this pattern means. There is no successful prosecution of, and then you run. Maybe they are using them for ritual sacrifice. Maybe they are using them for this. You're giving a lot of explanations. Then you have a very gruesome incident of Susan Magara. A ransom is paid and she still dies.
With the president's involvement still.
You have a stretch of 21 days between her kidnap and her killing and the discovery of her body. And there is communication you're able to pick up. Then you come to Nagrinya. The question people are going to be asking, is somebody really,
Do we have a police?
yes, is somebody really responding? But then, for me, telling you from what I have heard from other related security agencies, you find there are people who are spending sleepless nights. I have listened to audio recording of the late Susan Magara and the way she was killed, the people who killed her, and where the money they collected and how it was distributed. It's really ugly. You see that very organized crime. You come to Nagirinya and you find, well, maybe we'll learn more. Hopefully. I'm hoping that we'll learn more. But you're going still to ask and say, the antennas of the police should be high, especially when it comes to kidnapping, given where you're coming from. And you don't seem to see that in this particular case.
No, I actually do see it. I actually do see it.
No, I'm saying, I'm not saying you, but generally,
We are not seeing the police.
the police doesn't seem to be concerned that we are on the spotlight because of these many incidents.
I mean, it's true. I mean, there's some people in the police, like you rightly say, who are actually trying to do a good job. But there's a big number of people in that police force that are not supposed to be there. Now, the reality in this country is that systems have collapsed, and the police is one of them. In this particular incident, I still think that the response time was short. But even if it was that short,
what do you mean? What did the police do?
Exactly. Maybe that's what we should be discussing right now. What exactly? I mean, how did the police react to this, to the kidnap? And like the father says, you know, he was moving from one position to another, and that speaks to a lot of frustrations that many Ugandans go through in this country. Not just the police, even in hospitals, anywhere you'll go, even in judiciary or whatever. If you're going to get a service in this country, it's going to take you, you know, lots of time to have any efficient service. And the police is just one of a systematic.
No, but that argument of institutions, other institutions failing, the reason it shouldn't apply to our police, like the very basic, like it goes to the root of people's lives. Yeah, so it's like that's things we can allow to die and live with that. Yeah, we can live with the but a police, and people are going to continue dying, and in the end, you will find a mob, people taking laws in their own hands because police is not helping to apprehend the culprits. It's really a worrying trend.
Kenneth, let me have you on this.
For me, like you said, I'm now interested more in how the police is going to actually unravel this entire mystery that we are talking about, because at least there were clues. Like you rightly said, I don't know if the footage which was collected by the CCTV camera is able to project the individuals, because at a certain point I've also heard that the CCTV cameras that we have actually do not have facial recognition, does not have this facial recognition element of it. So you can still see somebody, but you cannot clearly tell that this is the person. So I'm hoping maybe they will try to go backwards and try to gather, maybe look at her phone records, maybe if there were any people she was talking to repeatedly or something, like to look for a pattern that can actually tell us, because now that she's dead, she cannot probably tell what was going on in her life maybe before the incident happened. Maybe the family is not also aware, so there is also that side of things. But then the police also to conclusively come out and actually explain how they actually missed that opportunity of actually pursuing these people. Because if they might have clearly seen through the CCTV, I don't know if they were seeing it immediately or they reviewed much later and really saw that the vehicle was moving to that side. I don't know if they are able to get live footage at that particular time, or whether they can zero in a particular area to see whether the subject they are looking for is in motion, or to be able to actually tell where that particular subject is. But also I wanted to introduce in the other side of the local defense units, because the police has also been beefed up in terms of security, and you would think that in areas where she was kidnapped place, there must be some presence of maybe patrols, because we've seen them in other suburbs moving up and down. And really I would think we should try to put the police under pressure to provide some clues to at least conclude this matter so that Ugandans can be sure that actually the police can play this entire thing out and do a very good job.
I'll tell you something, gentlemen and lady, and our viewers. The Susan Magara kidnap and murder. Well, the police built one narrative. Other investigators, particularly the military's CMI, built a different narrative. And part of the failure to resolve that case quickly was because the institutions felt these are secondary players. It's primarily the police. Once it had built a narrative, it became difficult to tell them and say, no, wait a minute, there is this, what we're also finding is this, and create harmony. I hope that doesn't play out in Nagrinya's kidnap and murder, as we have seen. And unfortunately, we're also falling in the same trap. We're talking about Nagrinya and forgetting Ronald Chitayimbwa, the unfortunate victim, a more unfortunate victim because he wasn't the primary target. Or maybe, that's the other question we need to ask. Was the target Maria? Was the target Ronald? I am hoping that when we have, when the police gives a statement, maybe if they give a statement tomorrow, like they normally do at their briefings, they are able to lead Ugandans to a direction that tells you, this is what we are seeing, this is what we have been able to find, and this is how we plan, we will get, we are confident that we'll get to the kidnappers. But otherwise, if from the kidnaps, the killings of mobile money people, from Katayimbwa, they got used to, from kidnappings for ransom that have at some stage became so rampant, from
Murders of women.
Murders of the women to assassinations. There are things that are happening, and an incident happened, it becomes a statistic. You do not want Ronald and Maria to become another statistic of Ugandans murdered, especially in their prime, young people. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll be continuing the discussion. We'll move to the collapse of the oil deal between the farm down of Talo's 21.4%.
21.5.
21.5% in those oil wells in Western Uganda. We'll be right back. You're still watching the Fourth Estate, coming you from the Serena Conference Center, right on NTV. And we have journalists helping us discuss and understand the stories that we read about in the headlines or we see on the news, what happens behind the scenes. With Jeff Mbanga, Kenneth Anderson Lukwago, and Agatha Atuhaire. Jeff, let me start with you. You're the business editor at The Observer. Did you see this farm down working out? Why did it collapse?
No.
We've reported on it in the East African and many others. For the first time, you had so many statements coming out in quick succession. I want to credit the Minister of Energy and the Permanent Secretary there, Robert Kasande. The statement came out that Friday evening, shortly after Talo's statement, saying the deadline is today. We haven't completed this farm down process. We are the deal is terminated. Then Total also issued a statement. So the information flow was quite quick. But why did this deal collapse? Tell us exactly.
So we saw this coming. It's been on the cards for quite a while. So this is just the thing. For the basic viewer of understanding this whole process. So you have about 5 oil companies operating in the upstream oil industry. So we have Talo from the UK, Total from France, Sinopec from China, Amu from Australia, and Oranto from Nigeria. But for purposes of this argument, we shall stick to the 3. Talo, Total from France, and Sinopec from China. So the whole issue is that Talo oil does not have money for the next stage of Uganda's oil industry. Tullow Oil is mainly an exploration company. So it searches for the oil, gets the oil, and calls in the big boys to help it move that oil from point A to the market. So they decided to sell, in 2012, they sold the first stake. Tullow used to control around 100% of the oil industry. So they sold in 2012 to Francis Total and China's Sinopec. And the deal was that each of the three companies would own 33.3% of the oil wells in the Albertine Graben. In 2017,
that's oil well 1, oil well 1A.
that is A1,
A1.
1A, 2, 1A, 2, and the Kingfisher. The Kingfisher is operated by Sinopec. Where then Total is in 1 and Tullow. But for all the three wells, for all the three fields, they each own 33.3%. So in 2017, Tullow decided to again sell, and I'll be quick on this, sorry if I'm taking out of time. We decided to sell an extra 21.5% to both Total and Sinopec.
Initially to Total.
Initially to Total, but alone.
Yes.
But then Sinopec also
Has
exercised its preemptive rights to buy into that deal. So it became Total and Sinopec 21.1%. So where does the contest? So where do the problems arise from? Government comes in to tax that transaction. It taxes a capital gains tax on that transaction. The first issue became that Tullow was selling part of its stake, so that instead of receiving a substantial amount of that money, actually the whole deal for the sale was $900 million, but $700 million of that would be to be reinvested back in the development stage, in the building of the pipeline and that kind of stuff. That is
it would finance Tullow's next involvement.
It would finance Tullow's stake.
Yes.
So instead of Tullow coming up with the money, they said we can sell off the stake of our stake. So Tullow was supposed to remain with about 11%.
Yeah,
11.8. 11 something percent after selling. So instead of receiving the money, that money would be reinvested back into the production stage, into the pipeline, and the all these other infrastructure needed for the oil industry. But then government saw that money as earning, that Tullow had earned money. The Tullow was saying, no, we have not earned this money. Actually, this money is going back. So there was a difference of opinion of what do you define that money? Is it an earning, or is it an expense that Tullow is going, or sorry, a reinvestment in the oil industry? So they had clashes of that. But the whole issue is that to understand Uganda's oil industry, like one IMF official one time said that Uganda is playing in the World Cup. If you can see, if you can put in perspective, it's like the football World Cup. Uganda is playing with these multinational companies who are, first of all, who are smart, who are bigger, and who have the financial muscle. Uganda is a new player in the oil industry, so they are sort of trying to learn things on the job. That's why there have been so many amendments to the tax regime. There have actually been about 7 amendments from 2009 up to today, because Uganda is sort of like moving goalposts to try and see how they can capture, how they cannot lose out on the oil money. So there have been all these tax proposals that have been coming up, and at some point they've come, I think the issues have come to a head where the oil companies cannot move forward because they think that Uganda is making very huge demands which do not allow the oil companies to bring in the money to invest in the oil industry. Okay. Some of these demands are actually unreasonable.
Please just help us understand, before I come to the other panelists, help us understand. My understanding, or what I have been able to pick, is that the major dispute is that Tullow wanted to transfer there is part of the agreement that Tullow entered with the Uganda government, which allows it to transfer and deduct its investment cost. and that they wanted in the farm down this one to be also transferred on to the successor companies to the 21.5% that they sold. Now, the thing is, when Talo does the farm down in 2017, initially to Total, Sinuk exercises their preemptive rights and say, we are the first person you have to call on us, and we have to take a stake because we share equally the agreement they have between them. And Talo has is trapped in there with Total. Total has to cede 11.2. It's about 11, about 11.25 to Sinuk, so that it also keeps 11.2, graduating Total and Sinuk to 44 point something.
Each 44.
Each 44 point something, leaving Talo with 11.8%. Now, Agatha, I want to come to you. I wanted you to help us understand.
The issue is mainly on recoverable costs.
Recoverable costs, yes,
and,
thank you.
And
that's the word.
capital gains tax. So the law is that if you're selling, 30% goes to government as recoverable costs. What you and the viewers need to remember is that there was even a contest on the first farm down where Talo didn't want to pay the amount that was levied upon it. There was another contest between Heritage, when Heritage sold to Talo. So the tax issue has always been a big issue in the oil companies. And people say that some say Uganda squeezes, like pushes them on the wall, wants to milk everything of their money out of these companies, which some fear is carrying away investors in the oil industry, for example. But then you have others and big players in this industry, like the former commissioner of the which is the directorate now, PEPD, Kashambuzi, who says, well, it's our resource. We shouldn't be seen begging investors to invest in it. So when Heritage sold to Talo, there was a capital gains tax problem that went all the way to arbitration in London. When Talos farmed down to those two, there was still a huge, the cases too were here, and one is still there in London.
It is the second farm down, which is Talos farm
down to Total and Sinuk in 2012.
That ended in
that
the
one was resolved.
Infamous handshake.
Yes.
That one was resolved.
But what I'm saying is that all the oil transactions that we've had so far, the three of them, have had a capital gains tax issue. So in this case, these guys were saying you cannot tax this money because it's part of our recoverable costs. Because Talo, being that it has been the longest in the industry, longer than those two, it claims it has done the donkey work in exploration, and it has the highest amount of recoverable costs. I haven't kept up, but at some point they were in 2 or 3 billion. They were saying by the time production phase comes, it might be 10 billion
US dollars.
Yes, and the laws are that before you start, there's cost oil. So before you start getting your share as government, the companies take their costs.
They recover their costs.
They recover their costs. Yeah, so
because government is not putting in money, the companies are coming with their own money and putting it in, and the government agreed that
which
you
is
recover
our production sharing agreements. That's the arrangement. Now the issue is, at some point there was a contention, but they started to agree with each other. Even Total and Sinuk were willing to help Talo in paying this tax, but for them they wanted to pay it over a long period of time, about 8 to 10 years, and this is what government has now refused.
I have had, Agatha, you need to help us, that actually it is those recoverable costs. What Talo quoted as recoverable costs, government disagrees. So they initially billed them 185 million US dollars of the 900. Then after a recalculation and agreeing on what they think, yes, this fits under recoverable, this doesn't fit under recoverable, the bill comes down to $167 million. And the dispute has been over that. The Total president has flown into this country, I think, about 3 or 4 times to try and negotiate.
Two times this year.
And met with the president. Total. Yes, because this dispute is delaying a final investment decision, which they call FID, to move to the next stage. You can't move until you have some...
Actually, the issue is the 167 is the tax assessment on the transaction. Now, the 167, Total, like Agatha says, actually agreed to pay a certain amount, about $85 million dollars of between 85 to 86 million dollars of that. Now that dispute was actually resolved. If you read Talo's statement, I think in June, they actually did say we've actually agreed on the principles of that tax arrangement. So that was sort of resolved. The capital gains tax was sort of resolved on that deal. What Agatha is talking about, she's almost right on the issue of deductibility. There's a cost cap.
Yes.
And the deductibility of costs. So the issue is that before there was not a cap earlier in the earlier years. So the companies were allowed to, recover their costs in some sort of uniform manner. Now what is happening right now is that there's a certain amount of money, which is around $617 million, which is being termed as a cost, which the oil company, which Talo,
there's a ceiling.
which Total wants a tax relief on that.
Which Talo wanted in the farm down to transfer to the successors to that percentage as a recoverable cost. And the government of Uganda has been saying, no, we resolve the issue of recoverable costs, leave it out of the farm down, we are done with it. You can't transfer that as a benefit to the successors, the equivalent of a successor in title to this percentage, the 22.5%.
And again, that's where the problem is. How do you define that? Is it a cost? Is it a reinvestment?
Okay.
Because at some point, this is money that is going to be spent in the fields, and the oil companies are saying, no, this is a cost, and you cannot. So just to make it a little bit easier of what's happening is that it's going to get to a point where the oil companies will have to pay income tax at the beginning of production. So at the beginning of oil production, the oil companies are going to be paying a tax, and that's what the government, and that's the tax that government wants to slap on the companies.
Okay.
And at that point, sorry, to finish my point, the oil companies are saying they'll still be in a loss-making position. They will not have recovered their costs. You cannot start taxing a company which is still in a loss-making position at the beginning of production. But it's a little bit technical, but maybe Kenneth can help us here.
Uganda's oil journey has been long and winding. As early as 2007? I and Angelo, 2000, no, after the discovery of commercial quantities, I and Angelo Izama took government to court and said, please, bring these production sharing agreements, put them on the table, let Ugandans see them.
Exactly.
There was a huge battle. I can't.
You lost the case.
I can't remember. Yes, we lost the case on technicality because they said they did not see how in us the public would benefit. And yet the Access to Information Act says any member of the public, you don't have to do it for someone else. I think the magistrate thought we should have gone through, we should have presented ourselves as journalists. We appealed. We have an appeal that's been pending in court since 2012. It's never been attended to. But, and you see some of these things coming up because of that cloud that operated
secrecy,
around,
yes.
the secrecy. Kenneth, let me put a direct question to you. Some Ugandans have been comparing the speed with which Kenya has been able to export fast oil, and Uhuru Kenyatta was excited tweeting about Kenya joining the oil exporting, oil producing countries over test oil.
Saying our oil has
Well,
become
Charles,
like Jesus.
Just let me maybe begin from where you stopped. First of all, you said our process has been much longer,
Yes.
which is an opportunity for us to learn.
Not necessarily.
You know, Hadman Resources went into the
Wait.
Semuliki area
Wait,
in the 90s.
I watched at the time when the relevant laws were brought to Parliament and what was happening, the discussion that was going on, and the government was telling us that we have had an opportunity to actually do studies on look for best practices. We have been to these all other countries, benchmarking, and we have learned on how to deal with the situation. For instance, I was told that the production sharing agreements actually do state exactly how issues of recovering will be handled. But then, like you said, the public has been kept away from such information. So one will then wonder how this dispute arises if the laws that the government has kept on saying that are very tight are in our favor, as a country, but keeps on maybe hiding them away from us. How the laws or how the whole process, including the training of experts, they could have failed to actually detect some of these things that are bringing these disagreements. For instance, on the taxes, and like Jeff here said, I think the biggest discussion is on whether the $700 million that Talo is actually saying I'm going to reinvest should be looked as a profit or should be looked at as capital that is being invested, and whether it can be taxed or not. I think that is where I think the big pull is.
And you actually asked a good question when you say some of the things are in the PSS, the production sharing agreement.
Yeah, exactly.
So now there's a clash between what is in the PSS
and what
the Income Tax Act says.
Mm.
So there's a clash on that.
And I want to agree with Agatha here when she says we are dealing with people who have been in this game for quite so long. Because I'm looking at this as a strategy of Talo to actually try to avoid paying this tax. When they say this money we want to reinvest, first of all, their strategy of saying that we are unable to raise capital. I'm thinking maybe Talo can do it from abroad by simply
but we all
Agatha puts it in very good perspective. When Heritage Resources farmed down to Talo, government was fairly smart. They said they turned Talo into the tax collector. Said, you go after Heritage, collect for us our taxes.
No, because
but there was
government
a huge
had refused Talo to take over before it gets
before
its
it collected.
cut from
But you're missing the point.
From Heritage.
If you're going to look at this transaction, basing it on the Heritage deal,
No.
then you're going to miss
We are
the point.
putting
We
it
just
in
put it
perspective.
Even putting it in perspective,
see,
because
the
you have to
Heritage
understand.
deal,
You have to understand
Heritage
why. First of all, you have to understand why the sale is happening. That's one of the first things. The reasons why the sale with Heritage is happening was totally different from why the sale is happening right now.
But
So in a way, you're sort of mixing two
But
things.
is that
No,
important?
two different things.
The most
Is that
thing for me-
important when we are saying that
The-
the major factor, the main factor in both has been one wants to get a tax and the other doesn't want to pay it?
For me, I'm looking at it as a
Or
learning curve. Did we
avoiding
It is,
paying?
it is not as simple as saying one
we-
wants to pay, one
Because
doesn't want to
Jeff,
pay.
But you see,
it's
Jeff,
also
okay, let me ask
Heritage.
Jeff. Let me just ask
Hold
Jeff.
it a moment,
Let me just ask Jeff a
okay,
question.
sure.
Do you think we learned any lessons from the Heritage
Farm down.
farm down, from the way the issues of taxes are being handled? Because I think every process, especially in the oil sector that we all know has intricate issues, as a country, we are on a learning curve. You rightly said that we are on a learning curve. Do you think the government of Uganda and all these officials that are handling the sector could have sat down and said, look, we are moving forward, we are likely to have this kind of problem. What do we learn from this particular dispute we have had?
I think they've been learnings. I know Jeff is supposed to answer that question. They've been learnings.
Yeah, and you're right.
Perspective requires where the journey started from. Both Heritage and Talo are primary exploration companies. Once they have discovered, they sell and move on. It's only in two areas, I think, that Talo decided in Ghana, Talo decided to move to progress to production. But they
Even in Kenya.
Do you think it's
even
the
in
same thing they are
Kenya,
trying to
even
do
in
here?
Kenya, they decided to move on to production. Once they had discovered commercial quantities of petroleum in Uganda, they decided to begin exiting the market, but maintain, keep some presence. So the first farm down, initially to Sinuk and Total, the one of 2012, they exited some. They exited 66.
Yeah, yes.
67% actually.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
almost 67%.
66.6.
Yes, percent in 2012. 5 years later, in 2017, they reduced their presence further, but want to maintain some limited presence, which is 11.8% that they want to keep a foothold in. They have exhausted their capacities. The question I want to throw to all of you guys here before we take a break is, are we in a comfortable position as a country that you can have the Talo president, the Total president, the Sunuk president fly in here? The president looks at them and sometimes decides, I'm going to meet you, I'm not going to meet you, I'm giving you a little time, you can go back. You can invest if you want, if you don't want, we are comfortable where we are. Is that safe? Number two, there is this whole debate about primary experienced car manufacturers, especially in the West, moving a lot more to electric cars and the place of petrol or petroleum in the future.
And we are also
How much? And because
we are also doing
oil,
a plant to produce solar-driven
yes,
cars.
Oil is a finite resource with a limited time, but in some other areas, which I don't believe, I believe we have enough time to explore oil and exploit it fully. But are these concerns, are they likely to play in future negotiations over this oil? And are we likely to see it come out anyway? We've been waiting for it since 2006.
Now,
I think okay, you want to go
first of all, we are in a sort of a catch-22 situation because we want the oil to come out of the ground. We don't have the capital. We can't do it by ourselves as a country. So I think it's very important for the government to actually sit on the negotiation table and see a win-win situation, because
but it's refusing to be bullied at the moment.
Because the companies are also investing their resources. And for me, I'm still interested very much so in the laws under which the sector is operating, because if some of these things were already provided for in the production sharing agreement, we would clearly know how much somebody is supposed to recoup after they have made.
They are.
So if they are provided for, I wonder why this kind of
the problem is, which is why I wanted us to talk briefly about our production sharing agreements. Why there are many types. So there's where a government hires an exploration company and pays it money and says, come and explore for me.
Once you find, you return to me, I know
you
how
give
to
me
do
my
it.
things.
Yes.
In our case, we do not have that money to pay those.
Exactly.
So we say, come, use your money, explore. If you don't find oil, it's your loss. It's a risk that you're taking. If you find oil,
we will share.
We will share, but after you taking the money you invested to explore. The problem here comes on who determines, how do they determine the recoverable costs?
Okay.
The investment, the company makes. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, because that's where that at a certain point, an oil company will say, I invested 10 billion, and we might not have the capacity to counter that and say, no, you are inflating your costs, you invested this much. Now, the other connotation also comes where Talo now says
Agatha,
that
sorry.
the money...
Sorry, Agatha. I thought the companies report regularly to government, we have invested so much, and they sign off. And we agree to this as a recoverable cost. We don't agree to this as a recoverable cost.
I was told there is a particular unit at the Ministry of Energy that actually from time to time vets what is being invested. And they actually said, this one we agree, including what the companies are supposed to bring
that's
abroad.
the ideal.
Yes.
That's the ideal. Do you
Agatha
remember
is saying
a
it's not
story
happening.
we saw and wrote about in papers about rigs that were lying idle? There's the ideal, but there's also, since you don't know much about this business as I know, I am going to come and say this is necessary even when it is not
necessary.
And first wait, Kenneth. So now the problem, apart from you having costs that you're not agreeing over as being recoverable, now you have people like Talo saying, me investing in the production phase, that is recoverable. I should count this money that you want to tax as money I'm going to invest again. Yet our laws say if you are selling, we are going to take 30% of that income. It's an income, not an investment.
Okay, thank you. I'm afraid we need to move on. This is a story will not end, and a story that has a lot of experts watching us out there. So if we goof on it, we'll have a lot of luck. But also there are a lot of people learning from this. Jeff, let me just come to you, Jeff, as we get out of this, we move on to a different discussion. This whole debate about are we in such a place as a country? Has the oil industry in this country, even without producing any oil, in a place where we can call the bluff of the big boys, as they call them? Especially when people are pronouncing death knell on oil and gas.
No, I don't think. I think we need to be very careful because if you're dealing with companies like Total and Sinok, you have to understand that these companies are partners elsewhere in other markets. So they tend to agree on so many of the positions that they operate in. They tend to move together.
They have a cartel.
Sort of. I don't want to call them cartel, but you can call them that they normally work together. So if you're in a market where Total has failed, it's very difficult for you to attract other players.
And Total, from what I hear, has been extremely frustrated to move into to the final investment decision because of these delays.
Yeah, I mean,
Because the delays mean they delay to recover their cut, their return on investment.
Yes. What happens right now is that Uganda's oil fields are really world-class fields. I mean, the amount of oil that we strike in this country, you're doing about over 80% strike rate. World average rates are at about 30%. So Uganda at over 80%, you're doing well. In terms of developing these fields, it's still low cost. All companies, Uganda is sitting on a jewel here. But you also need to understand that capital goes where the environment is conducive for it. So if you're a country like Uganda, yes, you might have this beautiful girl, but I mean, if the big boys are sort of moving away, are sort of stepping away from the negotiation table, then you are really moving into a risky position, and you could totally bring this
I
whole
hope you don't
industry.
unleash the feminists on us by comparing the girls and boys.
Our oil doesn't float.
Gentlemen and lady, we need to be able to move on. Interesting, because governments are especially desperate. This government particularly has always been desperate to get in all the money they can get in, or all the big announcements they can get in just before an election. We have played with the oil the way we have. Of course, we made many promises based on oil before. I am happy that has ebbed significantly over the years, that we don't keep too much focus on oil, that we can concentrate our lives on other areas. But this is a discussion we'll continue having and asking questions both of government and the players in the industry. We need to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll have little time, but we'll discuss Uganda Airlines returning to the skies. We'll be right back. The discussion on Uganda's petroleum industry, thank you guys, is a very technical discussion. So I know there are people out there who are watching and asking, what are these guys talking about? And people who don't understand the industry, and those who understand the industry are saying, okay, these guys are missing out something here, maybe. So we'll allow just a few more minutes to conclude on this. There is a concern, and I want to put that question to all of you, back starting with Jeff. Is Uganda in a position to call the bluff of these major players? Just a quick answer, yes or no?
It's not that easy. It's more of a yes and no answer. Yes, because it owns the resource. Yeah. Yes, because they are not yet prepared. So Uganda probably needs more time to put its house in order, to build up the skill,
How much
to build
more
up the local
time?
company. Thank you so much.
People are comparing, Kenneth, people are comparing. Ghana discovered oil, went into
2010.
production in 2010, went into production almost immediately, and moved on.
But you see, Ghana did not have the land issues that we have here, land compensation issues. Ghana's oil is onshore.
Yes.
So they do not have the kind of issues we
No,
have
but
here.
you see, you made this discovery in 2006, for crying out loud. This is 2019 going on to 2020, and you have not moved anywhere towards production. Then, Kenneth, other people have been comparing. We'll go back to the Kenyan story. And people are saying, well, Kenya discovered much later than we did. They have been able at least to send part of their crude to the international market and claim being players being part of these oil producing countries. Uganda, what's happening to you? There are stories people have been talking about. Are those, is that such oil, is it still somewhere in stores in...
We sold it.
Did
No,
we
it's
sell
not
it?
yet sold.
No, we haven't sold it.
But
It's
I
still-
remember
it's
the-
supposed to be
it's
there
not yet.
somewhere.
It's, still, it's at Kasemene.
Eh,
At Kasemene.
yes, Kasemene. Is it actually there? People asking questions. Or did some of it move?
It's
and,
there.
And what do you think informs President Museveni's stubbornness on this? He's been quite stubborn from what we hear.
Well,
dealing
I
with
have had the same story about his tough stand on it when he tells you my oil, you know. I think there must be something very unique maybe with our oil, but I think also probably the oil discovery is a windfall, like we were told in the recent past that it has the capacity to transform this country and even move us to first-class economy. And probably he also thinks it could be a bargaining chip for him in some way or the other, because
Politically, you mean?
in terms of influence, in terms of
Being an oil producing country.
being an oil producing country and getting it right, it can be a big plus for him. But also, I think the most important thing is that how soon do we go to the market? Because like we already discussed, there are dynamics that are going on the international market as far as oil is concerned. You have a neighbor like Kenya who is getting there first. Remember, you had a dispute with Kenya about the construction of an oil pipeline, and he's trying to show you from a regional angle that he's already doing it. You get a
Well,
feeling that
they didn't move theirs by pipeline, they moved it by trucks.
well, at least they moved something, and like we already saying, even our test oil is still in Kasemeni, going by what Jeff has told us. You see, for us the processes seem to be slow, but then I think it's partly that we have to go around in circles before a decision is made. Maybe the relevant institutions that are supposed to be doing the decisions are not at liberty to actually do it. It has all to go to the table of the president to have all these kind of discussions.
But this is an
to
area where he
guide.
defers a lot to the technical people. He does defy a lot to the technical people.
And
on this
exactly,
matter.
maybe that would also be
And
an
he's
issue.
left the tax discussion with Uganda Revenue Authority, largely. If you guys are right,
I don't think
I agree with you.
I don't think largely there must be something going on behind the curtains. There must be a discussion going on. So I think we are at a point where we need actually these companies to invest.
okay.
Yeah, and maybe the only person that can jump in from the other angle that Jeff has brought in maybe would be China. Before you know it, China might come in, because
But it's
China
already-
China is already there, but it could probably increase its stake and interest in the oil sector and eclipse the others, and maybe that would also have implications.
Where's the discussion on the refinery? Why is the
No,
discussion on the refinery,
That's
which
exactly
is
where I wanted to take you. That, like Jeff said, it's not a yes or no answer on about our oil journey. It's, you have a government that wants to avoid the oil curse, the infamous oil curse, and wants to do things right. But there's a danger of also scaring away the ease of doing business. If it's no longer favorable for these companies, they will not come to sink in money and wait 20 years. And if you want to know what's, I don't want to say the government is right or wrong, or the other side is right. But if you want to know what's wrong with our oil industry, you might want to look at these other issues. The refinery was supposed to be built, the land to build the refinery was acquired in 2010. People were displaced, not just moved. Some were displaced, some, their children dropped out of schools because...
But they were compensated, weren't they?
Not all of them.
Not all of them.
So you have a refinery that up to now, how many years from 2010? 9.
Not
has
constructed.
not even started. They got an investor. The first was in 2000 and when
They got
RT Global.
213.
13. And you know, everyone was seeing that everyone, like, there were already signs that RT Global is being preferred because of other political
Considerations.
interests, not really economic. And like they said, it didn't construct the refinery. Then the other day they got this Albertine Graben consortium that other people still said even then that it doesn't have the financial muscle to construct that refinery.
And its relationship with General Electric is quite loose.
So then you have the pipeline. You first agree on a route and you go on another, and even the other one that you have agreed upon, Tanzania now is the one that has been complaining that Uganda hasn't done its part.
And you have the shortest section.
And in all those, the final investment decision that you're talking about is not going to be delayed by what happened alone. It's going to be delayed by the right infrastructure, and it's not in place. So you might want to forget about oil, and we discuss other things, and we just...
But about $3 billion has been spent in Uganda's oil industry before the first drop of oil comes out. There's no way you're going to tell companies that let's forget about the $3 billion. Yes.
Well, we may not entirely forget about the investment.
The PSS.
Can we get our act together and actually get these things moving?
Gentlemen and ladies, one of the other discussions we're not having is the excitement caused by this oil discovery in 2006. There are many, many Ugandan business people who are bleeding because they rushed and made investments, borrowed money. It's come to term. For a lot of it, because they're borrowing for shorter periods of time, 5 years. So if someone borrowed money in 2006 after the discovery, government did announce and actually put expected oil resources in the national budget for 2009, and it is dropped off 2010 and subsequently. People have burnt their fingers, building hotels, preparing to benefit from the oil find, which has all gone to, and they burnt up. If you meet some of the people who are putting their money consistently for a long time, people like Bemuga, people like Bemuga and these other people in
there's an association for oil
the
and
National
gas,
Council for Oil. That national is called National
Oil and Gas Association.
No, it's not Oil and Gas Association. The one chaired by
Emmanuel.
Eli.
No, Eli Karanga.
The Chamber of Mines and Petroleum.
Chamber of Mines and yes,
Petroleum.
And petroleum. The many business people in that who have actually lost a lot of money and can't wait for this oil to begin coming out or to go to the commercial phase.
If you want to know someone who's frustrated, it is Eli about how they treat investors in this country, especially the oil investors.
Talk to all of them. Actually, talk to all of them. They feel really, really frustrated by what is going on, all these delays. It would be interesting to hear from them, and you guys can ask them what they feel. Let's move on to a more lighter story, and a more exciting phase of the major stories of the week, which is the return to the skies of Uganda Airlines. Did any of you guys manage to get onto that coveted list of the inaugural flight to Nairobi?
Not me.
No, not me.
No,
So who went?
it's unfortunate.
I have seen a couple of guys who have...
The people who went are behind us. Prime Minister Ndugu Rugunda.
Did he?
Yeah,
Yes, he did.
Okay.
The Minister for Works and Transport, Monica Ntega Zuba, and I can say Godfrey Chiwanda, the Minister for Tourism.
There was Moses Golora also on that flight, and a couple of journalists.
Well, that was a test flight. I don't know why they had to do it, but that they did it successfully. The thing is, the commercial flights they were able to pull off. Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, Uganda Airlines is back to the skies. Some of us who...
CNN misreported. They said Uganda launches national carrier. Uganda wasn't launching, it was relaunching.
Yes, some of us who thought this was a bad idea. Uganda Airlines is here. We need to be focusing on what now the future holds, what needs to be done so that we can make the first profit in the 10 years from now, hopefully. So we need to see if
it wasn't relaunched for profit.
It's a commercial.
It's a commercial business, so we expect them to be making profits in the near.
It's expected to break even, turn a profit as soon as possible.
As soon as possible, probably in the first.
If that was the objective, they wouldn't have launched it, because that's what we were talking about when you said we thought it was a bad idea. We were talking about other airlines in the region that are making losses.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
well, the reason
that's why we are putting it at 10 years from now.
Making losses is not because it can't be profitable. It's making losses because of corruption.
What
and we
about
need
South
to-
African Airways?
Even South African Airways, it's been grossly mismanaged.
What about
It's-
Rwanda Air?
Hmm?
Rwanda Air doesn't make profit either.
Mhm.
Yeah, the issues cannot be just corruption. But like I was saying, I do not think their objective was to make profit. People, when you see on Twitter, people bashing those who thought was a bad idea. National pride, you know, that at least we also, people...
We're flying the
it's
flag.
for pride, it's for sovereign reasons, really nothing to do with making profit, because I think it's hard to break even in that sector.
Well, for me, I think probably it's a good opportunity if you look at the long-term anticipated impact. For instance, when it comes to the planes that are going to come and do the longer route, I'm more interested in how the airline would feed into the tourism sector, because we have the potential, but then sometimes we are outcompeted in the region because we lack the means to actually bring the tourists, maybe directly, maybe from these major cities, because one will tell you that one of the biggest complications as far as travel is concerned is to do disconnecting flights. You fly into Dubai, you have to sit for 8 hours in Amsterdam, you have to wait in Ethiopia to be able to travel home, or sometimes you have to be flown to Rome and then back to Entebbe. So I think the easiness of travel, connecting us to the major cities, will be able to not only give us comfort as Ugandans as we travel to those distant places, but also be able to facilitate the easy travel of tourists. And I think we have a potential in that particular area, and it will help us to increase on the numbers and probably the foreign exchange that comes into this country.
I'm quite positive about Uganda Airlines personally, and I think because there is an opportunity to learn from the failures of Kenya Airways, the struggles of Rwanda Air, South African Airways. Those are good examples to learn from. And there's been this whole euphoria about relaunching of national carriers from Nigeria, Tanzania, Uganda. The thing is, the first week, for me, shows promise. There were glitches and the major issues from what I have been told. Can you go to, one is people have created a lot of fake Uganda Airlines websites. Would need to ask Uganda Communications Commission and Uganda Airlines how they're going to help, because if you type into your search engine www.ugandaairlines.co.ug, you get fake websites selling travel to destinations that Uganda Airlines is not going to. That's a major problem. Number two, so can you easily go online, book your ticket, and
It is legit.
one, it is legit, but you're able to travel with efficiency. The people who criticized the 8 passengers going to Nairobi, there are lots of issues that will come with that, especially for an industry that is highly scheduled, like an airline industry. Even tonight, if you intend to travel tomorrow, you might have to change flight, because if you're not certain that a particular airline will be traveling and you have things to do where you're going. So for me, that is a bit, we need to see the experience, how they service their clientele going forward. My major concern, Agatha, I want to bring it to you. There's too much focus on government. Yes, it's a national career. Competing where government has failed, because government, one, doesn't pay in time, is indisciplined in terms of its payment, is going to take advantage. I felt concerned that the too much focus on government, and I had, I think, the president ordering that all government officials should fly Uganda Airlines. Shouldn't Uganda Airlines have been, because it's funded by the taxpayer, thrown in there, let it compete on the best business principles?
But it wasn't.
No, it isn't. This whole thing of one, they announced the vice president was going to be the one, then the prime minister, then all these government officials flying an inaugural flight to Nairobi. For goodness sake,
And
why?
I think that's what creates the concern. Because I love that you guys are excited.
Yeah, I want to be
I am still skeptical that it has failed before. We have seen these government entities failing before. And we are saying, the question we were asking when Jeff says we had problems with it was is it the most pressing need of Ugandans right now? If it is, are we able to learn from the past
Isn't national
mistakes.
pride a pressing need?
Well, it is.
Mm-hmm.
But it is not more pressing than women dying in labor without
You should also remember one thing. It was also one of the promises in the NRM manifesto.
So it's been delivered
And
before
I
2021.
saw Dr. Rugunda emphasizing that in his speech,
Mm-hmm.
that this was one of the key promises the NRM made in the manifesto.
You should read the.
So
you should
need
read the
to
line.
understand clearly what could have happened.
Talking about that, Kenneth, you should read the line in Matembe's book, "The Struggle for Freedom and Democracy Betrayed," memoirs of Miriam Matembe as an insider in Museveni's government. You should see a line that Matembe puts on Ndugu Rugunda, especially what you're talking about. Not exactly
What's
the same
the
thing
line?
you're talking about.
I have
no, I
seen
need to
some
navigate through the
lines
book to find where she wrote that in the book.
So well, I guess for Uganda Airlines, we just have to hope.
Okay,
Hope that
let me read it for you. President Museveni laughed with that sarcastic laugh of his and told Honorable Kazora that he had gathered all of us all there so that he would teach us how to manage politics. He went on to ridicule other ministers. He didn't have kind words for Honorable Rukana Rugunda either. Look at this Rugunda, just posturing. Ndogu. Turabahereza amashanyarazi, meaning we shall give you electricity. Do people eat electricity?
You need to see the lines on Dr. Specials Awandera.
I have read them. I've read them in the book.
Things.
But Jeff, let's go back to looking at this from a serious business perspective. What, in your view, are the initial mistakes Uganda Airlines is making, or what are the things they're doing right? At least from the first week. The first week is a very short period to be able to judge them, so we must have that caution.
Yes. I mean, you expect the pomp and the excitement that comes with the relaunch of a new carrier
The
like Uganda
national
Airlines.
flight.
Exciting water shower in Juba, exciting water shower in Nairobi. Yes, and the other destinations they went
and
to.
Dar es Salaam and all that. But for
And
me,
Mogadishu.
what I'm not saying, I think we need to get away from the noise and the excitement and get down to serious business. And for me, one of the things that I'm going to be looking out for is the linkage between the aviation industry and the tourism industry, as you're saying. You know, Rwanda Air has a direct flight from Kigali to London. And the purpose of that flight, and when they launched that flight, they also increased the gorilla permit fees. I think to about 1,000, 1,500 there. It was a huge increase. And there was some noise in Uganda saying that, you know, UWA, the Uganda Wildlife Authority, should also sort of increase the permit. And
Now that we
UWA's
have Uganda Airlines.
and
No,
UWA's before then. And UWA's argument was that, you know what, guys, Rwanda has a direct flight to London, so it's easy for a tourist to come from London, see the gorillas in the evening, you know, and early in the morning head back to London. So, and that was, I think, was a smart move by Rwanda. So we need to see such smart moves coming in Uganda. How will Uganda Airlines help the tourism industry and also these other sectors? It may not make money as an airline, but it might sort of prop up these other sectors.
Is it possible that Uganda Airlines, because that kind of when you cut them that slack early in the beginning, officials are likely to handle this with the casualness that comes with it. After all, our purpose is not to make a profit. I think airlines are succeeding. Airlines are making a profit.
Apart from, I think it's only Ethiopian Airlines.
Ethiopian Airlines is making a profit. Emirates is making a profit. Yes, there was
Okay,
heavy
talking
investment
about
initially,
Africa.
but progressively they're able to get to where they're making a profit. You've put in taxpayers' money. You brought in the 2 bombardiers. Another 2 are supposed to arrive, I think, this month. September, yeah. They're supposed to arrive this month. Then the Airbuses will come in 2020. If they're going to come and you're going to build a fleet, the purpose of the officials running the airline should be to turn in a profit.
True.
Number one is reliance on government. Yes, government might be a good client, but government is a bad payer. You'll pay like invoices and they'll be paid much later, and then they can collapse you because you have running costs of keeping the airline running. There was a discussion before about taking back the handling services at Entebbe Airport, because that becomes the cash cow. The other thing I have been told is the choice of places where they have put ticketing offices for Uganda Airlines are possibly the wrong places. that it becomes difficult because it is an industry which is you're supposed to be on the go. If you have moved to providing for paying for your ticket by mobile money, paying online, then the offices where you should access should also be accessible. Where they have their offices, I think the Entebbe office, I've been told this is in a hard to access area. I haven't been there, so I don't know. I haven't tried to reach it, but it's in a hard to access area. There was a struggle to where to locate the Kampala office, whether you can drive in or walk in and pick your ticket with a lot of ease to move within the region. But I'm excited, Agatha, for one thing, that you begin seeing a possible, you begin seeing one of the benefits beyond the benefiting the tourism sector is to be able to go into those markets where Ugandans have sacrificed and do business with them with a bit of ease. So the flight to Mogadishu, which is emerging as one of the most lucrative regional, destinations within the region. You have international players, Turkish Airlines and the others going into Mogadishu, and the Juba route. Provide maybe Ugandans can finally leverage something and be able to access those areas and benefit from the sacrifice of the Uganda People's Defense Forces.
When in the meantime the taxpayer keeps maintaining the airline.
For the short run, are you guys
your assumption is that maybe those particular countries that we are flying to will also not in the short run think about putting in place their airlines?
If and when they do,
if that is the assumption, then
if and when they do, the national carrier here should have been able to establish itself as a business to compete fairly. Why is Kigali missing? Why is Kigali not one of the destinations?
Well,
there are 7 destinations. Kigali is not one of them. When it finally comes on, I've been told it will come on, it will be the 8th destination.
Why wasn't it the first destination? Why wasn't it among the first? Because we asked those questions when the announcement came, at least on Twitter. I don't know the answer, but we cannot guess.
So you would only be flying in Ugandans, flying only Ugandans that go to Rwanda and coming back, because we already know that Rwanda has already put in place that limitation that the Rwandans should not travel. So it wouldn't make economic sense in the first sense, in the first phase. So you think about waiting to see
there are people coming
if the
from
dispute
Rwanda
can be
Yes,
resolved.
one of the explanations that has been given, this was given to us at the East African, was we only have 2 airplanes, we can only fly so many destinations. 7 destinations is already big enough. But Rwanda is a 30-minute flight from Kigali, is a 30-minute flight from Entebbe. So wouldn't you think that that is one of the flights you would have included on?
So you fly to Kigali, then you fly to
yes,
Juba.
Bujumbura is on. Bujumbura is on. Arusha is on. Dar es Salaam is on. Mombasa is on. Juba is on. Nairobi is on. Mogadishu is on. And then they talk about going to Kinshasa. I don't know if Kinshasa hasn't been inked in yet.
I have also had
a discussion.
I've also heard about Kilimanjaro, and I was discussing it with a colleague.
Isn't Kilimanjaro the same as
Dar es Salaam?
Arusha?
No.
Yeah, Arusha.
Yes.
It's Arusha. It's in the Arusha area.
Yes.
And probably they will be targeting our East African members of parliament who fly from time to time to that area.
And you guys should be able to go and enjoy your holidays in all these areas now that
if the economy allows.
Okay, gentlemen and lady, let's end this discussion on a few quick comments. I want to hear from you what you think about the rules on use of IDs in elections that the Electoral Commission has announced. Yes.
I think
as we move towards 2021 preparations, will you be able to vote? What will dictate that you're able to vote? All players have been encouraging their members to go out and register, get the Andagamuntu as the primary the primary qualifier to get onto the National Voters Register. And we'll talk a little bit again on the Niles incident, what it means in relation to this journey towards 2021. Agatha, let me start with you.
Well, I don't think we have there's clarity on that EC comment that we are not going to use national IDs. because we haven't been explained to why. Before we came here, I texted the spokesperson who hasn't seen the message. But if that's what they are saying, is they are sending mixed signals. Towards 2016, there was a lot of fuss and hurrah about if you don't have a national ID, you are not going to vote. So one of the reasons people like Norbert Mao couldn't stand for MP because he didn't have a national ID. It created a lot of problems in Parliament when they were passing the registration of persons bill, with members of Parliament saying this NIRA should have nothing to do with voting, because then you are getting, their fear was that you're getting the election process and putting it under the army. And they were saying the Electoral Commission should retain its mandate and obligation of compiling the voters' register. But the issue created a lot of trouble, and they kept saying, no, we are going to use a national ID. And now we are going towards 2021, and people are being told, you will not use...
The qualifications are there on the screen for our viewers. You must be a Ugandan citizen, you must have national identification number, so even if you don't have the physical card, you'll be allowed to vote, and you ensure you belong to an electoral area.
So what I'm saying is that they need to come out and explain it further for people not to think they are targeting the campaign, the Bobi campaign of Nandanga Muntu, so that we overwhelm Museveni and vote, because people think that's what they are targeting. Because how come...
What do we know as journalists? Because there is where we help.
I'll
use myself as an example. I have never picked my national ID. It is supposed to be at the NIRA office. In 2016? Yes, I did.
How did you vote?
I went and
used it. You had a number?
Yes, I had my national identification number, but I could also get, I also managed to get the slip that allowed me to vote.
But would you have voted if you didn't have that? That you have registered for the ID already, and you have a
Yes, I had registered for the ID already.
And you had
the ID does exist. I've been told it's somewhere in Kitgum, where it registered from.
You registered in Kitgum?
Yes, I was in Kitgum at the time, and I registered. I just need to go and pick it from there and confirm. But I was able to vote, and I voted from Fort Portal. I live in Kampala. Yes. Yes.
You registered
I registered in Kitgum.
From Fort Portal.
I voted from Fort Portal.
Okay.
The centralization of the information enabled me to vote.
So here, the main thing in any...
So my patriotism is not about flying Uganda Airlines. It's about participating in Uganda's elections. and ensuring that I'm on the National Voters Register.
well, Charles, I think you are one of the lucky few who could have gotten that chance. I mean, if somebody does not have the presence, you are fairly a known person, I think.
No, I was working with I was working at the time with SEDU, and we were doing a campaign called Votability.
And you knew,
so I kept you were right. Yes, I kept trying to get registered.
What I'm trying to say,
wherever I was in the country, provided the details were consistent. So I tried in Arua, I wasn't successful. I tried in Koboko, I wasn't successful. I tried in Gulu, I wasn't successful. When I told the officials at one of the registration centers in Kitgum, they said it's okay. So they registered me, entered my details, and the national, the team, yes, that was doing the registration at the time, the task force, sent me a message and said, your national ID, like they did all Ugandans, not because I work on TV, but they sent a message and said, your national ID is in Kitgum, you need to go and collect it.
Charles,
what I asked that they transfer it, they failed to transfer it to where I was. But when it came to time of voting, I was still working with SEDU. I went to...
Kitugu?
No. I checked whether my name existed on the register at St. Peter and Paul's Primary School in Fort Portal. Once I confirmed that, I got the voting slip and went to Fort Portal and voted and came back.
Well, Charles, I want to agree with Agatha when she says that the mixed messages that the Electoral Commission is sending is what actually causes a problem. Yeah, there's a tendency now, you know, there's lack of trust in some of the things government institutions are doing. So when you add in something like that, it becomes a complication. People start thinking that probably you have other underhand methods or underhand things that you're trying to do. Because I also think from the other angle, as a country, we should be progressive. We should be moving. We shouldn't be going back and forth. For instance, Agatha did point out that when the Registration of Persons Act was being passed, if you read Article 66, subsection 2, and there's a provision of B. That particular article says mandatory use of national voters card and one of the national ID. And you will see that one of the aspects is actually to identify a voter. So you think that we should be moving progressively forward, and maybe thinking about in the future having a system where we can even swipe, and that's only possible when you're using the national ID that has an electronic feature. So now we are going back and forth, and for me, that's the biggest problem.
We need to get out of here. But Jeff, you need to make it as convenient as possible for voters. So if I am registered and I can prove that I'm registered, because you have gone electronic, you've gone digital, then it should be easier for people to vote from wherever they can vote from.
Yes, so? Yes, it should be easy for people to vote wherever they should be. But for me, the whole issue is, does your vote really matter in this part? I think you people.
That's Jeff. That's another.
We need to get out of here. Thank you, Jeff.
Another debate.
That's a good summary. We will not be able to read from this Matembe book. It's being serialized, but I'm just excited by the chapters. So, chapter 1, from Pharaoh to freedom. Not freedom, freedom. Chapter 2, the vicious cycle of human stupidity and early cracks in the movement. Chapter 3, the rattling of the snake's cage. Chapter 4, insider cliques, manipulation, and us against them. Chapter 5, elections, the unleashing of terror. Chapter 6, the aftermath of the 2001 general elections. Chapter 7, Chankwanzi, the theater of Uganda's political tragedy. There is a pictorial from 132 to 140, pages 132 to 140. Then chapter 8, fighting the lifting of the presidential term limits in parliament. Chapter 9, Museveni's government and the gender question, not yet Uhuru. She says interesting things in that chapter. Chapter 10, no political will to fight corruption. And then chapter 11, my work with Honorable Janet K. Museveni, the First Lady. You need to read this. Chapter 12, which is the last chapter, embracing life outside elective politics and a lifelong commitment to the women's cause. This is a book, I have said I posted on one of my social media platforms, that it's a book from the books we have seen, political books. She's as blunt as she has always been.
Maybe next time we need to discuss the impact of such works.
Yes, because I was comparing her work with the book I read, The Impassion for Freedom, which was done by the late Eria Kategaya. Then you have Professor Gilbert Bukenya through Intricate Corridors to Power.
You have John Kazora.
You have John Kazora as Betrayed by My Leader.
The Correct Line.
You have The Correct Line by Dr. Kobsinje.
How I Saw It.
How I Saw It.
Kutesa.
Kutesa. Then there's the other one of General Matai Chaligonza. Oh. I forget the title. Yes, and then there's the one by the late Simon Juba. Interesting when you have these books coming up, talking about people that I believe Matembe is still meeting, and the things she writes about them. She's that blunt. I find that very exciting. So congratulations to Miriam Matembe, and thank you very much, gentlemen and lady.
We had a brief discussion about this book with a colleague, and the concern of the colleague was that there is a group of people who will buy off all of these books from the shelves in town, and very few Ugandans.
No, but maybe let me just say one last thing. The foreword by Professor Sylvia Tamale, and the preface by Justice James Ogola will really do you good if you read just those. I think I find those very exciting. So Agatha, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kenneth. And thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you very much to the production crew that's there played to deliver the show to you. Thank you very much, especially to you all our viewers who are the reason we keep coming here and delivering this show to you. From me, it's a good night.